What if I told you that the most terrifying moment in any relationship isn't the screaming, the accusations, or even the betrayal? It's the silence that follows when an empath finally stops caring. Stay with me, because what happens next will completely rewrite everything you thought you knew about emotional power. Carl Jung discovered something that most people never grasp until it's too late. He said that every psyche has a breaking point, not where it shatters, but where it transforms. And nowhere is this more evident than in the empath who reaches their threshold. You see, people mistake an empath's caring for an infinite resource. But Jung's research revealed something far more profound, and frankly, far more dangerous. Here's what most people don't understand about empaths. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll never take their compassion for granted again. According to Carl Jung, the human psyche operates through what he called psychological compensation. When something is suppressed for too long, it doesn't just disappear. It transforms into its opposite. The empath who has cared too much, given too freely and loved too deeply, eventually reaches what Jung termed the enantiodromia, the point where things flip into their reverse. And when an empath stops caring, it's not gradual, it's absolute. Listen carefully to what happens in this moment, because this is where everything changes irreversibly. Carl Jung observed that empaths live in a constant state of emotional labor. They carry not just their own feelings, but everyone else's burdens. They feel the room's energy before they even enter it. They absorb pain like emotional sponges, believing they can heal what's broken in others. But Jung discovered something critical. This isn't sustainable. And when the breaking point comes, it's not a breakdown. It's what Jung called a breakthrough. Here's what Jung understood that will blow your mind. When an empath stops caring, they're not becoming cold, they're becoming whole. They're finally integrating what Jung termed their shadow, the part of themselves they've kept hidden, the part that knows how to say no, the part that understands not everyone deserves access to their heart, the part that recognizes some people are emotional vampires who will drain them dry. According to Carl Jung's theory of individuation, there comes a moment when a person must choose themselves. For most people, this happens naturally, but for empaths, this choice feels like betrayal because they've been conditioned to believe that caring for themselves is selfish. But Jung discovered that self-abandonment is the greatest violence we commit against our own psyche. And when an empath finally stops this violence, something extraordinary happens. They don't lose their empathy. They gain their boundaries. Here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. Carl Jung said that the most powerful transformations happen in an instant of clarity. One moment, the empath is still trying, still hoping, still pouring their energy into bottomless wells. The next moment, they simply stop, not with anger, not with drama, but with what Jung called psychological sovereignty. They see clearly for the first time, and what they see changes everything. According to Carl Jung, there's a profound difference between caring and self-destruction. Empaths blur this line because they believe their worth is measured by how much they can endure, how much they can forgive, how much they can give. But Jung discovered that true strength isn't in enduring abuse. It's in refusing to participate in your own diminishment. When an empath stops caring, they're not giving up on others, they're finally showing up for themselves. But here's what will send chills down your spine. Carl Jung observed that manipulators rely on the empath's caring as their primary source of control. They know that if they can make the empath feel guilty, responsible, or hopeful, they can keep them tethered indefinitely. But when an empath reaches what Jung called emotional detachment, the entire dynamic collapses. The manipulator's words no longer land. The guilt tactics bounce off. The love bombing feels transparent. The empath has finally developed what Jung termed psychological immunity. And this is where the tables turn completely. According to Carl Jung's research, when someone stops caring, they're not operating from bitterness. They're operating from clarity. The awakened empath doesn't hate their betrayer. They simply see them accurately for the first time, without the distortion of hope, without the filter of compassion, without the delusion that love can fix what refuses to heal. Jung called this radical acceptance, and it's absolutely liberating. Here's the final piece that makes this transformation unstoppable. Carl Jung discovered that the most powerful position in any relationship is indifference born from wisdom, not apathy born from exhaustion. When an empath stops caring, they don't become cruel. They become unavailable. They don't seek revenge, they simply disappear from the equation entirely. They stop explaining themselves. They stop defending their reality. They stop trying to make people understand. They reach what Jung called psychological completion, where their sense of self no longer requires external validation. And that, according to Carl Jung's lifetime of research, is the moment when an empath becomes truly dangerous. Not because they'll hurt you, but because they'll finally walk away. And this time there's no apology that can reach them, no promise that can convince them, no manipulation that can pull them back. They've stopped caring. And in that stopping, they've found something far more valuable than any relationship that required them to abandon themselves. They've found their way back home to who they always were before the world convinced them that caring meant suffering. This is what happens when an empath finally stops caring. And once you understand it, you'll realize that their caring was never weakness, it was a gift. And when that gift is withdrawn, what remains is the most powerful force you'll ever encounter. Someone who has learned that the most important person to care for is themselves,